Now, it wasn't that long ago that this new product, Brodak Dope, came on the market. Started with some very basic colors. Quickly, many other standard colors were added to it. And thanks to this gentleman right here, Mr. John Brodak, we now have the first true candy apple colors in butyrate dope. The product is mixed, formulated by Randolph Products. Chief chemist is George Anderson. And my name is Wendy Ertnowski. I did a lot of the development and testing on the product, all through the stages that it went through to get to this point. And right now it's ready to use on the next plane that you build. Now, years ago, if you wanted a true candy apple color, you almost had to resign yourself to the fact of using automotive paints, which can be very heavy, in some cases difficult to use, and the choice of colors was very limited. In some cases you had to mix your own. But all that's behind us now, because added to the Brodak line of dopes, there are now 5 color choices, all of which are very brilliant. You will not confuse these with colors that have previously been on the market, but there are some tricks to using them. There are some proven techniques that'll work for you if you watch the video and you pick up some ideas. And I certainly would encourage you, if you find any new tricks or tips, to share them with us. And we're going to leave a little spot on the back of this video so we can add updates from customers from time to time. And my background of using candy apple colors goes back into the 60s, when I had a motorcycle painting business that was extremely successful. The colors that I used at the time were made by a color called candy apple, and they certainly for their time were the most brilliant colors available. In the past, I've used those colors in conjunction with Imron top coats and butyrate top coats, but now all of the mixing is taken out of your hands. It's done by Randolph Products to the specifications set up by John Brodak. And I hope you'll be very successful in combining the tips you find on this video with possibly some tips that some of our customers and friends are going to add from time to time. And I hope ultimately we'll all be able to add this color choice to the choices that you have when you build that next model. Now, not long ago, I did a semi-scale stunt model of this airplane, the Miss Ashley Reno Air Racer of Gary Levitz. And we've added a color to the Brodak line that is not a candy apple color, but it is extremely bright and brilliant red. And we call that Miss Ashley Red. Now, if you're new to using butyrate dope, if this is one of your first time spraying, you might want to check out the set of videos that deal with using Brodak dope. It's a separate dedicated set. It has a lot of basic information. We're not going to try to cover basic information on this tape. This is going to be dedicated to the world of candy apple colors and all the things that we've learned over the years. So without further ado, let me explain the basic difference between candy apple colors and ordinary pigmented butyrate dope, and we can do that best with a storyboard. Now, we can start this discussion by going back to 1985, I believe, when this airplane won the concourse. It's my plane called the Killer Bee, but I had used all candy apple colors, and many of the people that saw the plane or were impressed by the color choices liked the way it appeared, especially the way it appeared brilliant in the air. And now that's an important point to keep in mind right from the very beginning. Candy apple colors are going to appear both on the ground and in the air, in sunlight and in shade, a lot more brilliant than their pigmented counterparts. And so the first thing you're really going to want to do is make sure the substrate, the raw wood, the woodwork, all the work that you put into actually getting the plane ready for its color paint, that has to be a lot better if you want a perfect result than it has to be if you're using pigmented paint. Now, one of the things that has to be better if you want to achieve real perfection with candy apple paint is the substrate. The substrate is the base upon which you paint. Now, underneath this can be any number of layers of filler, white primer, just plain ordinary clear dope, any number of materials, but the final surface that you're going to use for the candy apple colors needs to be a lot better, and let me explain why. You might not realize, but pigmented paint, what happens if there's little imperfections in your final substrate? And remember, we're just talking about the substrate, the base on which you're going to paint. These little imperfections, what will happen is when you apply, in this case, let's say you're going to use white. Well, white seems to cover everything in sight. If you have a plane with a lot of flaws in it, white will cover everything up. Because what will happen, you won't be able to see these. These will be buried in the white paint or in the colored paint. But what happens if you have that same surface, and boy is this ever obvious when you have a surface with errors, and you have now a surface on here that's transparent. I think you can quickly realize that because this is transparent, what's going to happen, you're going to be able to look in and see these flaws. So the first step, before you ever go any further or any deeper into a finish, if you know right from the very beginning it's going to have some or all candy apple colors, the first thing you're going to want to do is get the substrate as perfect as reasonably possible. Let's look at some of the differences so that you understand, and if you understand, you can maximize your ability to use these effectively in a way that's going to make your dream plane come true. Candy apple colors generally use a toner or a dye. They use no solid pigments. Standard colors, on the other hand, generally use pigments, either liquid or powder, or some combination of both. Another characteristic of true candy apple colors is they are transparent. In other words, you can look through them like looking through a piece of tinted glass into the substrate below, and light, of course, goes through these transparencies and reflects back at you. This is what gives them their brilliance. Standard colors tend to almost always be opaque. In other words, they cover what's underneath. They tend to mask or cover what's underneath. On candy apple colors, flaws generally will show in the final product. Now, light colors tend to hide. White, light blue, they will tend to hide mistakes. Dark colors like black, dark blue, some greens tend to accent mistakes. So if you're looking to hide things, you want to make a big portion of your plane a light, opaque standard color. Now see, where I'm going with this is we want to make a combination of the best of both of these worlds. One tip you'll learn almost instantly if you ever go to sand a candy apple color, when you put the clear on top, you'll see the scratches from the sandpaper unless you're using some really, really mellow, mild grit sandpaper. So my do's and don'ts include never sand candy colors. Another thing you want to keep in mind, if you ever have to touch up candy apple colors, it can be relatively difficult to get them to blend because, again, you're going over transparencies. Standard colors are much easier to touch up. But again, you want to know what all the factors are before you plan out a paint job. Now, one of the things I always do before I get involved in a paint job, I want to sketch out in my mind's eye or make some kind of little sketch or drawing what I want to try to hide, what I want to try to emphasize. Now, this is just one idea, and this idea can work well for you. What's generally real easy to do is to use candy apple colors in selected areas along the leading edge of the wing is just one example, or along the top of the model. Areas that generally are sanded perfectly or very easy to make perfect. Areas like open bays usually are a lot more work to get perfect, so if you're not real confident that your open bays are perfect, try to arrange the trim of the model so that this part of the model is typically done with standard colors, and the only place you'll have candy colors is on the parts of the model that are relatively perfect, and that's a good way to plan out a paint job. Again, on this plane I use this relatively effectively in the fact that all the candy apple colors are up on the front of the wing, where it's real easy to make sure they're perfect, and the top of the fuselage. So this was one of the things that evolved in the course of me doing candy apple colors years ago, is I never really was happy with doing the whole, even though I did several models all candy apple, I thought the most effective ones were when you could have the accent stripes be candy apple. But of course, this is just a personal taste matter. Again, another master of car painting, auto painting, custom painting, Walt Prey. He's given us many ideas over the years that we've been able to use. This, of course, is one of his very beautifully detailed models. You always have the case where all of the above doesn't apply, and this is one of the models that I decided I would do the whole airplane almost, except for the accent stripes in candy apple. And this plane, believe me when I tell you, was a labor, an absolute labor of love. Of course it was beautiful, in my eyes it was beautiful, but again, extreme amounts of work to make the substrate perfect before putting it on. If it's your first candy apple job, you might want to consider that little scenario of just doing accent stripes or the leading edge. Now here's another thing to consider. If you're one of the people, of which probably most people fall into this category, you're very concerned with weight buildup on a plane, you can actually save some weight by using candy apple colors selectively. Now here's some of the things to consider. Because candy apple paint has no pigment, there's no weight being added to the binder other than the weight of the die. Now when I say it's lighter, that assumes that you're using the same amount of material. Let's be real careful. We don't misrepresent this. If I were to put on the course of the plane, put 8 ounces of liquid, and I put 8 ounces of liquid of both of these materials, and they both covered exactly the same, this material would have added more weight because we've not only added the weight of the binder, but we've added the weight of the pigment. So you do have a very small, but it can be significant weight saving by carefully working candy colors into your paint job. There's a significant benefit in the fact that they are going to add less weight, and that assumes you use the same amount of material. Now, the counterpoint to this is, obviously, if you needed 16 ounces of this material, this would be heavier. It's the same way as when you're on a diet and they tell you chicken has half the calories of hamburger. But if you eat 3 times as much chicken, you see what I mean? But per unit, the candy colors are going to be a weight saver somewhere in the program if used properly. Now here's an example of from one of my old videos, and I have many videos, of how to try to get the substrate perfect before you go on. And it's so important to get that perfect before you move along to the next part of the paint job. Now there's a couple of tricks to using properly thinned material here, and I'm going to go over these one by one because these are significant things that'll help. This is basically our standard starting point. This is the point at which you start, and it's always good to mix the first batch to this ratio and do a little test. Now if you mix the material on the thick side, what you'll wind up with is extra overspray, unnecessary overspray. You're also very likely to wind up with orange peel. Now, orange peel, for anybody who doesn't know, is when you have a freshly painted surface and the paint dries in little blisters and bubbles before it actually gets to where it's going. Typically that happens where the wing joins the fuselage, and in that crease where the fillet is, it tends to get real rough and pebbly. That's generally known as orange peel. Typically a reason for that is the paint is too thick, or you're using too much pressure, or both. Now, the unique problem that you can have it with normally pigmented paint, but it's even more critical on candy colors. It's called zebra striping. And that is when you spray bands. Let's just say what happens is, here's what's happening. You're spraying a band, spraying a band, spraying a band, spraying a band. And what happens, where the bands overlap, it's darker than where they don't overlap. So in essence, it's dark, light, dark, light, dark, light. It's called zebra striping. Now that can happen for a number of reasons, but the first of which is usually that the paint is too thick and it's not blending together properly. Okay, when it's too thin. When the paint is too thin, usually what you'll wind up with somewhere down the road is runs. Drips, runs, a very long dry time. So obviously what I'm working toward here is that to get the paint at the right consistency is a real important factor in getting this to work the way we want it to work. And I've come up with an excellent little trick that'll help a whole lot for the person who's doing this for the first time. Now this is a really good tip, and this same tip will work on, actually it'll work on if you're painting normal colors almost as well, but it works extremely well. Extremely well. In essence, what you're doing is making a blend of slower than normal drying thinner. The reason for it being slower than normal is you want it to get extra time to lay down and blend in where the zebra striping is, that they blend in. This is an excellent tip to take a quart of Brodak thinner, 8 ounces of retarder, Brodak retarder, mix them in another can, preferably an empty gallon can, and that becomes a slow drying. It's going to take longer than normal to dry. It's going to be impervious almost to all but the most humid conditions, and it'll allow you, when you use this mixture, to thin your candy colors 50-50. This is going to be a tip worth its weight in gold. This is now getting into an area where we're trying to eliminate all of the possible things that could be a problem, so that in a final result, the first time you use this product, you're going to have real good success. Now, what I've found out is over the years, when using what we call a touch-up gun, an 8-ounce cup standard gun, I like to spray with that 50-50 mix, start at 20 to 25 pounds a square inch. And that usually gives me a real good shot at getting it real close on the first time. In the course of the last 6 months or so, we've been experimenting with guns sent to us by Will Nomura, the Anest Iwata. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm sure I'm not. But these are top-loading guns. They have an 8-ounce cup. They're absolutely beautiful. They're artist quality, and the advantage here, and it's a big advantage with candy apple colors, is they spray out an extremely accurate spray pattern. I've had, and they can spray even lower than this, I've had them down in painting Miss Ashley down to 8 psi and painting away. So the advantage is you can put on, in essence, what happens with more pressure, you're putting on a thicker coat with these high-end guns, and they are really high-quality units. You're putting on a much thinner layer of material. So for candy apple colors, this may be somewhat of an advantage. Now, you may be thinking another possibility is airbrushes. Now, I haven't had a lot of success using airbrushes for one reason. is I don't use them a lot. Years ago when I used to use them, I always had a problem with the tape pulling up the paint after it would go down. I wasn't spraying wet enough. However, the new, we haven't even tested it yet, the new Iwata airbrush might be appropriate. It might be a really good choice, and it might be a big improvement. So as far as the airbrush goes for right now, I'm going to leave this a question mark. But I would always, always, always do a test before you paint the model. So here you are, you're ready to paint this new plane. And what I would suggest everybody do, you can use, I've thought of, and it's real easy to do this, light bulbs make a good test medium. Fluorescent light bulbs make an even better test medium. The people at Randolph have sheets of tin. And what you want to do, of course, the first thing is when you have the silver in your spray gun, or gold, or whatever color you're going to use on the substrate, and candy apple can go over white, silver, or gold, and possibly other colors effectively too. What you need to make happen is you need to run a little test. Now this is the part where a lot of people skimp. And almost everybody that's going to have a problem with this material the first time they use it is going to have that problem because they were too lazy to do the test. Well, what you want to have is some, and you could use some bean cans, some light bulbs, something. You want to spray it with Brodak silver, let it dry for 20 minutes. Very easy to do. Then you want to take and practice with the material. Get the gun fine-tuned. You want to practice. Anytime I'm using a new paint product, I don't want it to be on my plane that it took me all winter to build. I want to practice on something that I basically can throw away when I'm done. And I'm willing to throw away 50 cents, $1 worth of paint so that when I actually go to do the model, I'm ready. But I know people, they always looking to save time, always looking to save effort and energy, and a lot of times it comes back to get you. So if you have the patience and the time, now what you would want to do is you want to practice on these little pieces. What you want to do is called the spray patterns. And I want to do this as a separate storyboard. When you paint normal paint, you start at one end or one side of the model and just start painting across till you come to the other side. Well, if you do that with candy apple paint, you're more than likely going to see the stripes. On your test panel, which is silver, you want to at one point in time do this. Now you want to let that not really dry, but just so it's not going to run, and then put the second coat on. And at this point in time you want to make a decision. Can I see the stripes? If you can't, you're done. But if you still see stripes, then you want to lay one in on a 45-degree angle. Typically candy colors are going to cover in 2 to 4 coats. And if the 4th coat were necessary, you're going to go like that. It's not going to cover in, typically, it's not going to cover in one coat like some opaque colors, standard pigmented colors. It's going to take 2 the minimum and 4 the maximum amount of passes with the gun, and depending on if you have high-end spray equipment or hobby quality equipment or an airbrush or whatever equipment you have, that's what's going to make the difference. What's going to happen too is on a small area you'll be able to get away with some amount of just doing that. On a big area you're going to wind up more than likely seeing some of the what can be striping. And so the bigger the area is, the more critical it is to use this patterning effect. And I think most of the professional painters, Bob Brookins for instance, Walt Prey, people that are professional painters would agree that that's the best way to do it. What can be very, very effective with candy colors, even more effective than with other mediums, is to take your lettering, back mask it all out, so obviously the only part showing is the lettering, and start at one end. In this case, put a stripe across the top. And if you watch how this is done, you'll go look at some of the fancy truck lettering. This is exactly how they do it. Now take the next stripe, put the second stripe on here, but go back up over the first stripe. So in essence, you have two coats right at the very top. And I'm going to just make this even more accented than it really is. Then the third, leave the middle kind of silvery and vague. The same thing on the bottom with another color is paint. Just lay it right across. This is how people generally do some real fancy lettering. Now when you put the second coat on, go a little further up, but go back over the first coat. Well, what that does, it makes the bottom, and you can even do the third one, say. This is just an idea that you might want to incorporate on a future plane. But the bottom will have 3 or 4 coats, so the bottom gets real dark. And you see how quick that gets to be? Even with silly marker pens, it gets to be three-dimensional. And then as the last thing, just take and highlight it by running a little bit of black up on the edge. And this is so easy to do. It's very, very simple to do these blends. And especially with candy colors. And it looks very, very effective with almost no extra work at all. It's an example of Jimmy Casale, a real nice blending job. Look how nice the lettering looks on this. The blending of the colors, especially candy colors, they really allow you to do some pretty exotic lettering and blending without really a lot of extra work. Now Bill Rich's SV11 lettering has that same look where it's multi-toned. Now just as an example, this is a motorcycle that I painted. In fact, that's me on the cover of the magazine, Big Ego Trip here, with my own tuned pipes. But notice the coloring. What I did, I had done it, this is when I was painting motorcycles, basically as a side job. And I had done a lot of it in multi-tones. And many of these motorcycles appeared on the cover of magazines or in articles. Now another example of Bill Rich, a good example of a really beautiful lettering job that he's done here. Really nice. And that can work to your advantage. It's so easy to do it, it's actually easier than just painting the letters one color. I-82 plane had some pretty fancy lettering, all done with shades of silver. It's the same thing, it's candy colors and shades of silver. John Sunderland here, another good example of some beautiful lettering work, multi-toned. Just gives you some real good ideas of what's possible with no extra work at all. Now even if you don't have a need for having this candy apple paint on your plane as trim, it makes a great accent for a cockpit. And the choice is obviously on a bubble canopy plane would be to paint the whole cockpit, or assuming you didn't want to see the pilot details, or assuming it's a carved or a molded in canopy. And then you want to, around the edges, just make the paint, I like to put on a coat of black then, just around the edges. And then take the last coat of the color and darken it up where it goes into the black. So in essence, it looks a little bit three-dimensional. Now no matter how you do that, this is a bubble canopy. Another way is to go from the top to the bottom. Start at the bottom, make it dark. Paint the next color on, next color, next color. So as it gets to the top, it gets lighter. Then down at the bottom, you want it real dark. These are just the common ways of doing it. And then of course you want to accent, put a little black, fog in some black, and then put that last coat, candy apple, right over the black. And that kind of blends it in real nice. Now on some of the cardinals that I've had, some of these cardinals, I purposely took a green candy apple color, fogged it in top and bottom, and left the center a little bit shinier than normal. So it had a little bit of a three-dimensional look. And for a long time, a lot of my planes had green canopies for one reason, is I always thought whatever color you make the canopy, it should be a color that appears nowhere else on the plane, so that it's kind of my own little personal rule. So if you were to have a green canopy or a blue canopy or a yellow or whatever, that it's a color that doesn't appear anywhere else on the plane. And that was very effective. Back to Jimmy Casal, painted on canopy. He's done it in tones of gray and then accented the center. It looks here like Bob Gieske has a canopy that's painted all silver, but notice it's a color that appears nowhere else on the model. The late Bob Baron-Zavanti, he chose gold and then accented it with black around the edges. Very effective. And you notice on this plane, on Relentless, one of the things is the green is the only place on a plane that's green is the cockpit. Lou Dudka's plane, and again, this looks like the year of painted canopies. Lou Dudka has his painted in silver with black outlining. I don't know if Ted has I can't tell by this picture if Ted has a cockpit, but whether it's painted or not, Bob Baron's plane has again the gold. So again, it just gives you one more way to brighten up a model, make it a little bit different, without a lot of extra work. Now this was one of my models where I used kind of a candy apple blue, airbrushed on the canopy colors, and no place else on the model is there any blue. And I think that's a little, well, it's my own little personal taste. And this was one of the planes I had used a lot of candy apple colors on, basically all different shades of blue, and then gone around the cockpit with a very, very light blue. Now this plane had several variations of paint on it, but again, a little gold metal flake with some clear over it, and a little highlight of candy apple gold, and it sets it off. It makes it look tall. Now if that was just painted the color of the trim, I don't know if it would be as effective. Casmanato's got a gold with a, looks like a candy apple gold fogged out with some black. And again, another one of the Cardinals that had a green canopy on, basically on a red airplane. Bob Hunt with a beautifully detailed canopy, beautiful, on one of his really, really nice foam ships here. Look how nice that the detailing around the cockpit is, how it sets it off. It's airbrushed in, highlighted with silver. Beautiful work. So I hope this has given you a couple of ideas of how you can use candy apple paint, not only for some fancy lettering, some fancy cockpit work, some fancy trim, but how in essence to go about laying out a very effective and very easy paint scheme for your next plane. Now up to this point we haven't really sprayed any paint, but let me just go over one other thing. And I call it the worst of all worlds. What would happen in the worst of all worlds? First, you wind up buying the candy apple colors. Then you don't read the instructions. That's something I'm guilty of a lot of times. Then to top it off, you don't thin the material properly. Don't bother watching a video. Don't bother trying to use the proper pressure. No testing. No practice. And I almost guarantee you when that's done, you will in essence have the absolute worst of all worlds. Something I've become very familiar with over the years, because every once in a while I'm prone to do the same thing. But over the years I've learned, and I've learned the hard way. I didn't learn this by going to school, trust me. I learned it by screwing up motorcycles and having to repaint people's things for free and whatever. But I have learned. It's taken a long time, but I can guarantee you, if you are looking for the worst of all worlds, that's exactly how to get it. And what we're looking for here, obviously, is the best of all worlds. The smiley faces, the happy planes, the no headaches, and it's very easy to achieve. Read the instructions on the can. Watch the video. If this is the first time you're using Brodak Dope, get the Brodak Dope videos. The time you spend watching a video, you're going to save many times that amount of time by watching the videos. There's plenty of little tips. They'll save you many times the cost and the time of watching the videos. Thin the material properly. Use that tip that I put up on the screen not long ago. Use the correct pressure. Don't start spraying at 50 or 60 or 70 psi. Make up some test pieces and be patient. Be very, very patient. Practice. Practice. You practice the stunt pattern. You practice other things in life. You practiced the violin when you were in high school. Practice painting. Practice on some test pieces before you paint the plane. If you have the patience to do all of those things, you're probably going to be real successful. Call me up and say, hey Wendy, pizza's on me, or something. Now anytime you're using a new material for the first time, there's a good chance you'll have a problem. Well, what do you do if you have a problem? Nice thing about having a video, you can go back and watch it again. You know, it's not going to break the bank for you to have a video library with a few videos. Watch it again. Maybe the problem you're having is you skipped over one of the steps, or you've invented something along the way that's making it difficult for you. You still have a problem? You're always welcome to call me. I'm in my workshop. My number is 201-896-8740. I'm in the shop generally from 1 to 5 weekdays. I'm sorry, I don't do any shop work on the weekends. If it's impossible for you to call during that time, you can write me a letter. I will promise you I will answer the letter to the best of my ability the same day. My email address is wendyu@aol.com. If you have a problem, feel free to email me. Don't ever be afraid to just pick up the phone and give me a call. Granted, sometimes the phone is busy. We have a lot of people calling. Maybe there's a lot of people with problems. I try to help everybody. I try in every possible way to make it easy for people to build, finish, and enjoy the airplanes that I've come to love in my lifetime. And this is a very, very good resource. My database of knowledge is available. It's available free. And I've been known from time to time for people that I know are not going to buy a video, I'll generally loan one to you. But the point is, when you get this information, then it's your obligation to help the new guys coming up the ladder so that they can enjoy the hobby too. Okay, now here's something everybody is going to do from time to time. From time to time, you're going to paint an area of your plane. It's either not going to come out acceptably, or you're going to see some zebra striping. Let's pretend that for whatever the reason is, we're not happy with that area of the plane. How do we get rid of it? How do we erase it? How do we make it go away? Well, the first thing is you want to put on a blocker coat. A blocker coat can be anything from auto primer is one choice. Brodak white primer is another choice, or you can just go over it. Now I don't have a silver ink marker. You can go over it again with silver. That's called a blocker coat. Now once that is totally blocked out, now you have another choice. Since it's now silver, you could also go over around the perimeter of the trim if you wanted to with some 1/8 inch tape, using that for the edge, and that would add one more stripe to the model. We don't have the right colors here, and I apologize, but you leave that tape on. Let's go back over to the other wing just to show what would happen. We'd put on this 1/8 inch tape We've done this to Mike's model recently. That tape stays on for the whole duration of the plane. Now let's pretend we want to paint, no good. We want to paint the front of this candy apple red. So in essence what we do is a very common technique. It's a technique I use all the time. We mask off and cover up that 1/8 inch tape with the back mask. Now when we're all done, we peel up the foil, and by the way, Walt Prey is the one that turned us onto the foil, and we back mask this area and paint this part of the model. So what, in fact, we've just done this on the Miss Ashley videos for anybody that really wants to see some real nice lightweight finishing. And when you're all finished, the last thing, you pull up the silver tape and it accents, it leaves everything with a little line of silver. Now whether you do it in conjunction with a blocker coat, let's say for instance you need to touch this up, I would say it's always better to go to a blocker coat. Silver would be my first choice. Block it out and redo the whole area. A lot of times, one of the things that I've done, and it's kind of a tricky thing, but really not that tricky, is I've put my ink lining on in such a way. Let's just pretend that you've come up with some ink line pattern that simulates the real plane. But what this does, by having ink lines somewhere on the plane, if you were to have to touch up this red, let's say for instance you had a problem right here. Well, what you can do is go up to the ink line, mask off, and go right over the ink line when you mask it, and just back mask this one little piece, and you can use your ink line as a boundary. If you somehow, in the course of laying out your trim, you figure out that you want an ink line here and an ink line here or one here, well now no matter where you're gonna, you see what you've done is divided this up into areas that you can repair or fix very conveniently. And with candy apple colors, that's real important, because you really don't want to paint this whole area again if you just put a scratch or a buff through in one small area. So if you lay out your ink lining properly, the inking can be your kind of your lifeboat here for any future repairs that have to happen. And notice on this how the little thin stripes of gold, and gold was the base coat, the little thin stripes, I left the tape on right to the very end, and that became my gold stripes. And this is a paint job that I'm happy to say many people have over the years seemed to like. The reason I know they like it is a lot of people make one very similar to that, and it's very effective and it's very easy to do. Now here's using all of the techniques we just talked about, very similar techniques. Jim Casal has put out some beautiful models. How nice that little accent stripe on Kevin Stewart's plane. It dresses up a model immeasurably to have that little extra stripe in there, and it's very easy to do. On some of my models I've gone so far as to put multiple stripes, and that's not as big of a deal as you think it is. And if you get into something like that, then it's really good to check out, well, many of the videos, the Miss Ashley videos, the Spitfire videos, the Brodak Dope videos, all cover that in complete detail. You can see the little white stripe on here, how effective that was. The nice shading on the canopy, the candy apple colors. Even on the real Miss Ashley, some nice, that thin striping adds a lot of elegance. Now another characteristic of candy apple paint that's, well, it's not really as easy to repair. It can be repaired, but it's not as easy to repair as the standard opaque colors. Now one of the tips that I've found is before you ever sand candy apple paint, get at least a minimum and possibly 4 or 5 coats of clear on before sanding. If you put a sanding scratch in candy apple, it'll come through in a color, it'll make you want to just jump over on a plane. It really is a really frustrating thing. It does not respond well to sanding scratches. A lot of times if you're sanding white or light blue or something, and you forget about the 1200, you reach for the 600, you go grind it out, and what happens? Yeah, you go through on a rib cap or on an edge or something, you can touch it up easily. Not going to happen with candy apple. It's going to be very difficult. You're almost always going to need a blocker coat, and if you don't have an ink line, you're almost always going to have to do that whole area. So the answer is to be very, very careful. Get plenty of clear on and sand only with Sikkens M600 and 1200 grit paper. Good thing to keep in mind is the base coat that you choose, and the three most common are gold, silver, and white. As you take every color, and let's just take a blue for instance, if we're going to be doing a blue, over gold it's going to have kind of a green cast, it's going to make it a little greener. Over silver it's going to really be a bright blue, and over white it'll be a little bit lighter blue. Now on a red for instance, when it goes over gold, gets more like an orange red, a brighter orange red. Over silver it really maintains its red, and over white it becomes a very light red. So virtually any color, if you're looking for variations, let's just pretend the green over gold would have a little bit different cast. What you can do is make up kind of a little checkerboard like this, and what's a good idea is you just lay out a stripe of gold. I do this all the time when I want to see what these colors are going to look like. Gold, silver, and white. Make 3 stripes. Then paint the candy colors down in this direction. And then you can make a selection. Gee, I like this one over white, this one over gold. So in the future when you lay out your paintwork, obviously you need to use that color then. But all of this information together, I think will just give you a good basic background, something you can put in the bank right away before you go out and try to paint the plane and have some kind of a problem. I think okay, what Mike is doing is we're making up some little test panels. What is that, sheeting for aluminum siding? Or?
Yeah, step flashing.
Okay, it's just ordinary flashing you can buy in Home Depot. You can use cans, it's nothing special. Some scraps of balsa. And what these little things are, these are little test panels that we're going to use to get familiar with the paint colors before we actually do an aeroplane. And since this is the first time you're going to be doing candy apple, the more practice the better. Don't rush this part of it. We're in a very, very humid day. We just had about, 64 days of rain or something?
Yeah, all the month of May.
So we may have to add retarder, but always, when you're using a new color that you're not familiar with, now what we're going to do is take these outside and just spray them, using one of the hobby guns that we always keep silver in the same gun. Take that outside, let's spray them up. How many you got, 4?
Yeah, one out there.
Okay.
4. Right.
Now we're just using one of the ordinary hobby guns. Just want to get some silver on there. The only reason for the, and this is not a part that you have to make fancy, but believe me, it's money in the bank if you practice on these little pieces, and you can obviously spray them over and over and over again. Now one of the things I never like to do is put silver in a gun and take it out and then go put another color, because it seems like you always run the risk that some of that would still be in there. But having little test panels, even if you weren't using candy colors, these little test panels are a great idea. All you need to do is get it silver, Mike. Doesn't have to be fancy. You also, if you want to, you can paint the back. And we can use, well, don't worry, we'll just paint it over twice. Alright, and now what we do is, because you can see how much humidity we have from the rain and everything, we want to run a test. And the little test is, you can see the ground is even still wet. What we're trying to do is determine whether this is going to blush. If it blushes, we're going to add retarder, but we're going to give it a half hour to tack off. If it doesn't blush, then we won't have to add any retarder. Okay, now when you do it, just fog on nice thin coats. He's using Will Nomura's gun, and this is the first time you've used this gun, so you want to get familiar with it on a test piece. Keep it in the sun. The sun will let you see if you're getting too thick. There you go. Put it up in the sun. You can hold the gun even a little closer. It'll go on, because you want to get that nice fogged in look. Okay, now turn it over and do the same thing to the other side. So just get used to the feel of the gun. That's about right. The way you have it right now is good. Now on the third pass, see, because you're not doing a big area, you're not going to get zebra stripes. If you were to try to paint that whole tin in one color, you could have a possibility of zebra striping. Now let me see this. Let's hold this up in the sun. Let's see if you can see these colors.
You get that in there.
That gun works nice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Nice feel, it's nice and light. Ideally, you could get it in 3 passes. Then you know you're going just about the right speed. That should be 1. And it's that bottom edge that you want to have uneven. You don't want to have a stripe there.
Done.
Okay. All right, now we need to get the plane out here. This looks like it's drying up nice. I'm going to set up some kind of a little table here. Well, not sure how we're going to do this. We want to try to get in the sun, just for the reason that you can see the transparency in the paint a lot better. It's really not a good idea to paint in the sun, but in the case of candy apple, it shows the transparency shows a lot better. Now what's very convenient about doing it this way is if it doesn't come out the way we want it, we just put it right in a dumpster. Okay, let's see how that's cooking. Somebody saved money on tape here. Okay. In other words, we want it to be the darkest it is in by the root, and just let it fade out about just before it gets to the gear. Very easy to use that gun, isn't it?
Nice.
And it's got a nice light feel. It's not heavy on your hand. But see how nice that fog's in now? All right, maybe you go about another inch. What you want to do to avoid the zebra striping. And what you do when you get to the end, Mike, is just pick the gun away. Just pick the gun away, and that's it. It'll fog in real nice that way. Get an idea how brilliant these colors are. They're really beautiful. All right, now you want to repeat same thing. That's perfect. Don't even bother doing it any more than that. That's as bright as can be.
Wow.
Peabody that's Peabody put chewing gum right where we're painting. Oh, but was he chewing gum? God. Okay. Let me just get this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, we got to get some tape.
All right. Well, get this color drying, and then we can go experiment with the second color. You want to get all the red on a plane before we clean the gun, and then we'll put in the next color. Do all the stripes one way. Let it kind of dry up. Now I don't know if on the video you're going to pick up how brilliant, how bright these colors are. They really are bright though. That is about the brightest colored dope I've ever seen. Just work on that feather edge. Now while we were waiting for the paint to dry, we switched, put the candy blue in the gun. Blue covered okay, Mike?
Yeah.
All right. Now watch you don't, try not to get any on the lettering. See, what you'd like to do is not have the lettering.
Okay.
Shoot it from the angle of the lettering this way. You know what I'm saying? So this way, or you could just lay a piece of cardboard up there.
Oh.
Cover's nice, huh? You just want to avoid those zebra stripes. If you see stripes, then start going in the other direction. If you don't see any stripes, you know, take advantage of it. That looks good. Now while this is drying up, I'll mix up the next color, so we can always have one color drying on the top. We practice on the bottom, get Mike familiar with the technique, and then go right into, once it dries in this temperature, it'll tack right up. How's that look? Good? Yeah, that's bright and bright. And we're doing the lettering kind of in the opposite direction to add some interest to it. Now one of the choices you always have with this paint, if you want to add a little sparkle to it, you can put a little bit of gold or a little bit of silver in with the candy apple. That adds a little special effect, a little difference, or whatever you want to call it to it. But as it is, this paint right out of the can is pretty brilliant. And I hope that's showing up on the colors of the video. Are you almost ready for the next color?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Did that dry up yet? Okay, we don't want to put the next color on until it's dry. We're waiting. You can see what we did. We fogged in a little bit of the royal purple around the edge, which is a Brodak color. That really dressed it off real nice. And the same thing on the lettering. We dressed off one of the letters with the royal purple. Another custom Brodak color available in no other dope. Now gold is the most transparent, so you want to watch for zebra stripes. Now go the other direction. There you go, back. And then on a 45-degree angle. We've had it drying out here for about 45 minutes. Let's see how it dried up now that you have all the colors on.
We have the colors.
We have the colors. Wow. I'd say that looks a little bit of all right. All right, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna put this aside to dry for a while. And what Mike is gonna do, he's gonna go get his daughter, who's probably gonna be really impressed.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna I'll mix up some black so we can outline everything with black. Jamie will be very, very impressed. But let that dry a good half an hour now before, so we don't get anything smudging on it. What Mike is doing is edging, just putting a fine edge. And the way you do this, don't paint where you want to paint. Just let the overspray go on. In other words, shoot toward the tape, Mike. And just let it overspray out onto the part just a little bit. This really highlights it when you do this. Because don't forget, we're going to have a silver stripe. What's going to be right up against that is silver. Just get the overspray on it. That's all you need. Now this gun is a lot easier to fog in things. The hobby guns are, you know, you get bigger droplets. It just doesn't want to do this as conveniently. This is the first time you did this, and hey, I think this is going to be fine. Just go right around the whole edge. We'll let the bottom dry up and give it a flip. See, now as time goes by and we learn more and more about these colors and what colors look good together and which ones blend together. Obviously you can mix the purple and the red, the gold and the green. You can do all kind of tricky things. What we're going to do as soon as Mike is finished here, we're going to put clear in a gun, and in the clear just put one little drop of gold so that there's some little gold specks in the top layer, just to dress it off, make it just a little fancier than its counterpart would be if it didn't have the little flakes. You just use the Brodak gold, which is what we're trying to test. Now see, on a thin area like this, you don't want to blacken out all the colors. Just get that edge. There you go. Go down the tape and just let the overspray. Just that. There you go. Oh man, that's beautiful. Okay. Even though the sun's going behind the clouds, one side that isn't accented and one side that is. And of course, everything we do, especially when I'm trying to help somebody learn some of the basics that I've been able to pick up over the years, one of the things is always work on the bottom first. So if in essence you make a mistake or you're not happy with the color, let it be on the bottom, not the top. Now let's make sure this really dries before we flip it. What do you think, Jamie? This is the real Miss Jamie, Mike's daughter, who he named the plane after. You think we should pay him for this job, or should we give him a bagel or something?
Give him a bagel.
All right, give him a bagel. All right.
Okay.
Now today Mike is taping off what's going to be the top block, and what we're going to do is we're going to mix up a special color of paint. One of the choices you have with all candy apple colors is they mix very well. Now if you take candy apple paint, mix it with silver or gold, obviously you can make metallic colors, very bright metallic colors. What's another choice you have is you can throw in a little bit of black. A little bit of black will darken the color, and what we're going to do is try to mix up a relatively dark color of blue for the top block to accent the lighter and more brilliant colors that are on the wing. And of course we're going to use Will Nomura's spray equipment, and so far that has served us well. Boy, I like the way these colors faded in now that they're dry. But the idea is, again, it's a style thing of trying to get a relatively dark top block, then a lighter color that'll be the whole plane, and of course the very, very brilliant candy apple colors. It's kind of a mix and match thing, and when it's done right, it really is very effective. Make sure you rub that tape on your t-shirt, baby. I don't want to be fixing any silver here.
Yeah.
Alright, and as soon as this is all backmasked, we'll get outside. It looks like... Now, another tip. This is something we're going to have to deal with today. Is it was relatively humid this morning. It looks like it's better now. But because there's a lot of humidity, we're going to put a little bit of... Right from the get-go, put a little bit of retarder in the paint. Oh, yeah. Tinfoil-o-matic. You're so lucky. Alright, the paint is mixed, the compressor's building up pressure, and we're ready to add the final touch here, baby. Okay, what we've done, since Mike is still putting a roof on the house, we've used the shingles for a bed here. Now there's a couple of techniques you can use. One is you can paint the area black, put a little gold flake in the black, a little gold paint even, Brodak gold will be fine, and then paint the candy apple right over the black, in which case you'll get what amounts to be a dark purple. In this case what I did is I wanted to darken up the blue, so you can take the blue and just add a few drops of black, and it turns it into a totally different color. So in essence it'll add an extra color to the mix of colors that's on the plane. That gun's working nice, huh? Yeah. All right. Just feather it right in, nice and easy. It'll always cover a little better when you put a couple of drops of black, or you can even put dark blue in there. It'll just cover a little bit better, but in this case we want to get a nice consistent. Now if you get any, I don't see any zebra striping, but now what you want to do the next time you do it is go around that way. First get one coat on the whole thing, because we want to see if we're going to have a problem with moisture today, and we may. Whoop, the wind is blowing here. Whoa. Yeah, we work under some adverse conditions here. Now why can't we work like John Brodak, where everything is controlled environment? Works in a meat freezer or something. Look at this. All right. Yep, hold on to it, baby. This shows that you're really tough when you can paint in a hurricane. But see how when you get the zebra stripes, when you go in one direction, so in essence, when you're doing a big piece, you want it to all be the same color. Now you got to kind of go back and forth. You'll figure it out, believe me. And then what we'll do is shoot a quick coat of clear on there just to see if through the clear we have any zebra striping. It's a little bit harder to work with this material than say if we were just using ordinary paint. It would be, you know, this would cover a lot quicker. Look at this, we got a B-2 bomber going over the house. We got a hurricane blowing. It's raining, it's snowing. All right. See how easy that makes a stripe if you're not careful?
Yeah.
All right, the next step, even though it's very, very humid out here, we've only had to add about 10% retarder, but I think it's good to just add the retarder right in the beginning. Don't even wait. All right, little by little, coming around, coming around. You still have the hook in the garage we can use?
Yep.
All right. It's going to rain any minute. Yeah, if this guy would finish the roof, man, we'd be in Fat City.
Get the garage.
I don't think it's going to happen. This guy's too intent on building model planes. He lets my house go. As we were making this video, believe it or not, I have no roof on my house, and there's every chance it's going to rain today. But does Mike care one iota? Not one bit. After removing all the tin foil, now the next step is going to be to backmask the whole plane. And the last part of this paint job is going to be with everything backmasked in tin foil. Obviously we're going to paint the rest of it the base color, which in this case is going to be white. Just figured we'd put this tip on. This is on a lot of our other videos, but on this it might be one that you, as you're experimenting with candy apple, you'll want to do. Now notice one of the important things we're taking an impression of the trim line. The trim line, of course, is raised because it's 1/8 inch tape. Take an impression and then cut it undersized by maybe 1/8 of an inch. This was Walt Prey who originally introduced us to the tin foil trick, and it's worked well. Worked exceptionally well. And of course the thing we're trying to do here is have no place on a model where there's 2 coats of paint. It's always 1 coat of paint. We don't want to have, for instance, if we painted the whole model white and then painted, we've got at least 40% of the model painted. We would have added 40% of unnecessary weight. And in fact, it's more than 40% because a lot of colors don't cover other colors. You try to paint white over red, you will add a few extra ounces unnecessarily. But this minimizes the amount of weight that we need to put on. Now you cut it out undersize, tape it in position, which Mike has already done on the other side. And the idea is to get as little of the tape touching the actual painted surface as possible. Do each letter it's just easier, because I'm trying to give Mike a hand, he's got to get out of here. It's just easier to do each one in a strip, rub it up on your, what hopefully is a clean t-shirt. You haven't been working in a coal mine or on a roofing job. Mention any names around here. Okay, and I'm just going through one letter at a time. Get that tack off the tape before you go through. Okay, the next step will be obviously to paint, but rather than risk anything on a rainy day, we're going to wait for at least a decent day. Now once the white is sprayed, and it's kind of redundant, I mean we don't need to go back over this 50 times, carefully pull up the tape. But now we've reached a point in the model where a couple of significant things need to happen. First of all, if you want to put any ink lines on, any letrosets, anything like that, that's fine, and this is probably the appropriate time to do it. But you'll notice in this paint job that Mike has, there's no part of the model that has 2 layers of paint. And that's one of the ways of saving weight on a model. Now, one of the things we're going to be doing on this is we're going to wait for what we hope is going to be a good day to spray to clear. The single most important thing to remember is that first coat of clear, if it has too much thinner in it, what it'll do, it'll go down and make funny little spots in the candy apple. So I like to put that first coat of clear on relatively dry. No more than 50-50 thinner, and certainly no retarder, until we get a coat on here. And once we get a coat on here, then it won't be a problem. We'll let it dry overnight. Now it's a good idea. It's a really good idea. Unlike painting with regular colors, if you were doing a Miss Ashley paint job, well, you can cheat the system quite a bit more than you can with candy colors. Another good scenario here is to let this dry if you're not really going to go flying the next day, or if you have another plane to fly. A couple extra days of dry out so that the candy apple colors are rock hard, totally dry, totally gassed out before you go on to the next coat. Now what we want to do is that first coat of clear we want to put on very, very carefully. We want to make sure we have a perfect weather day, because you can imagine with colors this bright, if the humidity kicks in and we have to go add retarder, we might run into trouble. We'd really like not to run into trouble. Mike has put quite a bit of time, about 18 months, into this plane, and we don't want any high-risk things happening to it. Now I'm going to do a little storyboard on putting the clear on. I think that'll be, most people, well, there's a lot of ways people put the clear on, and that's one of the ways. With candy apple you want to be a little more careful than ever. Now we're at the point where we want to put the clear on a plane. One of the things we want to do, and I've covered this on other videos that are like the Miss Ashley video for instance, is do selective application of clear. Selective application means in the spots we're going to tend to rub the plane, or that you'll see very obviously, we want to put extra clear. The parts that you're not going to see much, you want to put as little clear as possible so that you get as much of the clear in areas that you're going to see. Now just to make an example up, that changes just a little bit with a candy apple paint job, and I'll show you my little technique. Is I take all the candy apple areas and I'd go over them. This would be a 50-50 mix of clear. I would just want to put 1 or 2 coats of clear on all the trim, similar to this. Dry. This is a 50-50 mix. It may have a little tendency to orange peel. Before I'd paint the plane, notice I've gone out over the edges of the striping, kind of fade that in. Will Nomura's gun, by the way, is excellent for doing this, and you can purchase one of those from John Brodak. This is One of the tricks that I find very, very helpful is to get clear, as much clear where you're going to need it, extra clear maybe along the leading edges, around all the perimeters. Again, I won't belabor this because on the Miss Ashley series of videos there's a long dissertation on exactly how we did that, and that, by the way, resulted in one of, maybe not one of it, it actually was the lightest plane we've ever built. But you can see all the other areas have less clear. Right in the middle here we don't need as much clear. So what happens, the reason for this is, the reason I want to emphasize this is that these are the parts of the model that you really see. The top surfaces of things. Look at this, as I'm doing this, a bird walks on it. Get the hell out of here. This bird is loose in the shop. Anyway, the top is what you really see and what'll take most of the abuse from UV. So if you're going to put a given amount of clear over it, certainly one of the things that's different though with a candy apple paint job is anywhere there's candy apple, we want to make sure we have a lot of extra clear. Maybe 3 or 4 extra coats of clear. So, this from the side and you see, well, this is the candy apple stripe. We have that silver ditch in between, and this would be the white. And this would be the candy apple. One of the things we need to do is where that silver is fill a ditch with a few extra coats. Just a few extra coats airbrushed on into the ditch. Then we want to fill this little area here. And this may sound like it's really unimportant, just go paint the whole plane. Then you wind up with maybe an ounce or two of unnecessary weight. And I would assume anybody that's at the level that they're using candy apple paint wants the best finish possible. Once you fill that little ditch, 3, 4, 5 coats, doesn't matter, then you can put that first, what I'll call a dry coat on, cover everything. Now the one thing, you'd probably want 2 or 3 coats. I would be thinking 2 or 3 coats would be enough. Again, my coats are a little thicker than, say, Bob Brookins' coats. We learned that at the... By the way, if you haven't seen the Brodak meet, the demo that Bob Brookins did, or Bob Brookins and I did, has a lot of good points that you might be able to pick up from. But here's the whole point, is at no point in time have I sanded this. I want to get enough clear on here that when I go to sand this, there's no chance at all I'm going to come down into the candy apple. If I happen to break through into the candy apple on the edges, what's going to happen is when you put the next coat of clear, that little sanding scratch is going to open up. The next time, or if you use any retarder at all, that scratch is going to get bigger. It's going to actually look like an alligator skin. It's not going to look attractive. Now, you don't usually see this. This does happen with black, white, red, yellow, but it's opaque. So you don't really see it. When it's translucent, this color on top is translucent. It lets you look down. Keep this in mind. This is the most important thing you'll pick up off the video. You never, 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 never sand candy apple, the colors, or the first 3 or 4 coats of clear that go on top of it. For this reason, is you'll be able to look down and see the sanding scratches. Of course, it's a transparent covering. If you do an opaque paint, it just covers this and you don't see it. It's still there, but you don't see it. This is, anytime you sand, you put little scratches in the paint. And that's good because it builds a nice mechanical bond. And you're going to fill that with, so that the ultimate area that's being filled with paint has a lot of surface area. But in the case of candy apple, and this is the most important thing, is you don't want to ever have the sandpaper go down and touch that. Whatever sanding you do has to be in the clear. Now what happens if you do break through? Oh gee, you're a little, you didn't have your 6-pack of beer or something in the morning and you're rough on a, whoops, you see the sandpaper turning, let's say red, blue, green. The minute you see it turning a color, if the liquid that you're using, the M600 or the Windex or the water, if it turns the slightest bit the color of the candy apple, it's not a problem if it touches and you see white. But you see any of the colors, you want to immediately stop, clear that area off, wipe it with M600, and where you've broken through, dust on 3 or 4 more coats of clear. You don't ever want to get sanding scratches down in there. The real expert finishers that have these beautiful panels that they look like they're 6 feet deep like the ocean, if you put one scratch in there, you've basically got to go back down to put on a base coat and more, and it's just a nightmare. This is the biggest single stumbling block that I know of, and if you avoid that and do it the way I've shown here, and if Mike, he may not be due to clear today, I don't know, it's looking like it might rain. We're going to wait for a perfect day because we don't want to add any retard. We hope we're not going to have to. And this is the one stumbling block that'll ruin a perfectly good finish. Right there, if you can avoid that one and wait for a day that you're not going to have to add retarder. These are little idiosyncrasies you need to know about when you use candy apple color. Now, because of Mike's work schedule, I wound up putting on the first coats of clear, letting them dry out. We want to give this a couple of days to dry out, of course, and then we'll shoot the final clear. Now, because of this crazy weather we've been having here on the East Coast, we've had to work around some really severe humidity problems, and I've documented how I dealt with them on tape 239. Again, when you have humidity, it's just something you have to deal with constantly. And one of the things that's happened is the first time we put clear on these colors get 3, 4, 5 times as bright. But this is only the first coat. And the purpose of having this on here is just to seal it up, let it dry out. We're not gonna put the other half of the clear or whatever on until we see how this dries up. So far, I'm real happy with the way, even though, again, we're in some 90% humidity conditions here. Again, the best thing is always to just wait if you can, but in this case, Mike is his work schedule is pretty tight, and he wants to get this sucker flying. I mean, he's excited about it. I already made the pipe for it. We're ready. Again, if you need more information about dealing with humidity, tape 239 is the one. Going to get more sunny of a day than this, baby. Let's see how that dried up. The thing's been sitting out there for about a week.
Yeah.
Tilt it so I can see it in the sun. Just look and see if you have any spots where it's clouded up. No. Okay, well, we can put some clear on it today. Always candle it. Look at the colors. Okay. All right, let's get a couple. We probably get 2 or 3 coats of clear on there today. No problem at all. And if you can, we'll let it dry out here instead of in the garage. There'll be less humidity out here than in the garage, you know. All right, let me mix everything up. All right, if not, we'll move the compressor out here, give you a little more room. Remember, what you want to do is get about 2 to 3 times as much on the candy apple parts as you have on the white. So shoot the candy apple. Boy, that gun works great, you know what? That really makes it easy. And give 1 coat to the white. We'll let it dry upside down. Once it's dry, we'll flip it over, do the top. This is the real Miss Jamie here. This is the Miss Jamie. The true, the one, the only. Okay. And candle it. Now I'm trying to get the camera in a candling position so you can see when that goes on wet how it's going on. And then put extra, because you got it all horizontal, put extra right over the candy apple parts. You gonna make it with that hose, or do we have to move the compressor?
No, we gotta move.
Okay, let me go in and move the compressor then.
Either that or move the plane.
Nah, oh, either way. Just get extra on the candy apple, extra on the edges, because we're going to lightly sand those edges before we put the last couple of coats on. Now, because of the way the weather has worked out in this part of the country, we've had so much rain. What do we have? The world's record of rain. I wound up sending out some incomplete copies of this tape to people that were already doing candy apple work and wanted to see what they could pick up off it. Now, Mike started out at the tip using 1200 sandpaper, M600. First you want to knock everything down with either 1200 or 40 steel wool, which you probably could use if you had a foam wing or a wing without rib tops. Now, it's always best if you're buffing, and we have plenty of videos on buffing. The buffing is no different than buffing Miss Ashley or a Spitfire, but best to always do a small spot at a time. First start with the finish that'll look pretty much like this. It's rough. Knock it down. You got this knocked down, right? And
yeah.
Avoid the rib caps. You can see it's got the little spots. And the final little bit, and he started out at the tip, so this, and used by touch, of course. Boy, that's coming up beautifully.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the colors are just out of control. They're really nice. Yeah, you can see the light starting to reflect on it already where you have it done. Oh yeah. But don't rush it. We want to take plenty of time. Just doing one spot at a time. In the case of the lettering, one letter at a time. Gorham's, 1200 and M600. Gorham's is probably the best choice, and then just finish it up with a couple of coats of Final Shine. We still have to put the hinges in. Now you can see your hand reflecting off it already. And then just work your way down a wing. And then the last thing we'll do is that top block where we have the dark color with the little gold specks in it. I think that'll buff up real nice. Mike's learning one of the secrets of buffing. One of the real secrets is let the plane dry out. What do we let it dry? About 2 weeks?
2 weeks. Yeah.
Something like that. That certainly makes it a lot easier. And the other secret is
You gotta have a bird on your head.
let Peeps do the buffing. Boy, I wish we could train him to buff out the planes. Oh, would that be nice. Anyway, all of the Brodak colors are buffing out beautifully. We've got another day, maybe tomorrow, put the hinges in and set the motor up. Now this is going to have a tune pipe with a 60. This is going to be a very unusual power package. Probably take us a little extra time to get it set up, but
Something different.
everything new, everything old.
Something a little different.
Okay, the next thing we're going to be doing, and we'll do this off camera, we're going to have to fit up the Super Tiger 60 Mike has with the header from my 91 plane. And we have a custom made tune pipe that's going to go, a windy tune pipe that's going to go in this plane. I'm going to do all that fitting probably off camera, most of it. Now I just hope you got some good tips, some good ideas about using these candy apple colors. I'm sorry for the people that, well, we went through that rainy spell, but we didn't want to take any chances. And it looks like our gamble has at least paid off somewhat. One of the things you may be interested in as you know, as a modeler, we're developing 4-stroke engines at this time, and we have some pretty good basic video on how to set up a plane with a 4-stroke. And we're going to start with Mike's plane with a Tiger 60, of course, but because it's made for that. But I wouldn't be surprised if at some future time it winds up having some 4-stroke in it. Time will tell. But so far, I think this has just been a great experience for Mike. This is the first real full-size plane that he's painted start to finish and buffed right up to the very end. And if we have a little room on the end of this tape, we're going to maybe even get a couple of minutes of him flying it at some point in time, as soon as we get it put down, put together, put all the hinges in. Got the hinges on here, baby?
Hinges are in.
Cleaning up the hinges, I love it. Now it's starting to really look together. Starting to really get the look of the colors. Now we want to take this out in the sun. See what this is going to look like in the sun here.
We got to put the...
What else you got to do? You got all the hinges in?
We got to put this on.
Oh, put the rudder on, yeah. Look at this. This is the entertainment of the afternoon. The candy apple bird. Hey. Feed him a Q-tips. Actually, we're not going to. We weren't going to put this on the video, but we are. Mike didn't buff this plane out. He really had the bird buff the whole thing out. I want to take this outside, get a look at it in the sun. Needs Mike. I got Q-tips. I can buff my own plane out. He's still got that Q-tip. I don't believe it. Oh man. Get that rudder on. I want to see this sucker in the sun. Ah, the cardinal. The look of the cardinal.
No, I'm going to leave this up to you. I'm going to make you babysit this.
No. Well, it's been a long time coming. I'm sure Mike is just itching and dying to fly the plane. Maybe I should take it and fly it when he's not around. Too bad he's here. Anyway, I don't know if you can appreciate how much these colors seem to really catch fire out in the sun. They really glow. Mike did a nice job of buffing it out. Now, one of the final things that's always important to me anyway is how does a paint job, when you lay out a paint job, how does it actually look when you fly in the plane? And we're gonna save the last couple of minutes of this tape for possibly getting a couple of flights down at the field. We haven't run the motor yet in the plane, of course, but this has the same tune pipe, Super Tiger 60 and tune pipe, basically the same thing I used in '91. Wound up with second place that year, so it's kind of one of my favorite memories, instead of being fifth for 900 times in a row. But anyway, we did get our second place, and we saved that header, which was made by Craig Gunder, and the pipe I made for Mike. We polished up the spinner on this guy, and well, I'll tell you, years from now when you go to the Nats and a lot of people have already used these kind of candy apple colors, this will still be the first plane. And I want to thank Bob Brookins. He's been just great in helping us. Thank John Brodak. When we started this, how many months we've been working on this, Mike?
A couple of months.
Couple of months. 2 years it feels like. But I never really knew if, well, we never really knew if we really were going to be thrilled to death with it when we were done. And how do you feel about it?
Thrilled to death.
You're thrilled to death, okay. He wants his money back. He's never buying me another bagel. Now, Mike didn't realize it when he first bought the kit that it was ever going to turn out like this, but I'm sure right now he's thinking, And what I try to do is look at it from every possible angle. But the main thing is, in my feeling anyway, is how is it going to look when it's flying. And as I said, we're going to try to get a couple of flights on the end of this tape, at least so you can see what the paint job looks like when it's in the air. And what I always think happens is the sun kind of shines on it, and the sun will pick up little spots as you're doing maneuvers. It'll kind of flash at you like a diamond ring. Again, I don't know that unless you have a real high definition TV, if you're ever going to get the real colors, the real, as brilliant as they are in real life, but they are brilliant, boy. Yes, so we're at the flying field. We want to get a look at how this paint job is going to look in flight. We're doing a trim day on it. It started out being a real nice day for the first flight, but it's deteriorated rapidly to the point where we don't know which way the wind is blowing. How'd that feel? Okay?
Better, getting better.
All right. What I said before is even the best paint job in the world, if it doesn't look good in flight, if while you're flying a plane it doesn't look or give the presentation that you're looking for, it could be disappointing. Now this, I've seen it already because we've been shooting video for another tape for the subscriber tapes, but this is one of the nicest ones. You know where you get a lot off of this, Mike? When it goes up against the trees, you can really see it.
Yeah.
You know, like some of the Spitfires and stuff, difficult to see against the green background. This stands out great. Anyway, I'll videotape a flight while you're flying. Put in a good flight and then I'll fly it.
Okay.
I'll tell you how good it is.
Good.
Maybe I'll buy it off you.
I know it needs something, but I just can't figure out what it is.
Well, the tab was wrong on the first couple of flights. The tab was too small. We got to make that just a little bit bigger. I mean, that's stuff we could do at the house. You just want it good enough that we can fly and get flights on it. This looks like while you're flying it, baby.
Hit it, Bonzo. Oh, it's hot now.
Well, you've shared the adventure of painting Mike's candy apple plane. I hope you've picked up some good information from the tape. I would say Mike is about ready to start entering contests. We have the building of most of this plane on video, the wing, construction and things like that, the making of the tune pipe. And I really want to congratulate him whenever we have somebody that, this is really only the second plane he's built, I think. I have to ask him. But I love the way the colors present well when the sun hits them. They're much brighter than traditional colors. And you've seen all the little tricks and tips that I've tried to put on. If you had any additional questions, I would think Bob Brookins would be a great guy and be perfectly willing to help answer. There are some other candy apple related tricks and tips on basically on the end of the Brodak 2000 series where Bob Brookins did a flight demo. A flight demo, yeah, a painting demo. And I want to thank Bob for that. Bob has been instrumental in making this work. He's been a big help. He's provided the original source of the pigments, worked with us step by step to make this work. And Mike's got some dead air here, but keep in mind now, when you have expert level flyers and you can make things work, or guys that have been finishing planes for 20 years, Bob Brookins, for instance, I would expect nothing but perfection. But Mike is relatively new to the hobby, number one. He's only learned to pattern this last year, right now. He's not ever entered a contest. This is only his second plane. And I would expect one of the things he has that I think is really an asset, it's a tremendous asset. By the way, look how nice the colors look there while the plane is flying. One of the things is an asset is, on the Brodak finish, he did all Brodak. Didn't try to use up last year's old thinner, didn't try to skimp and whatever, you know, mix in some acetone or dishwater or something. This is an all Brodak finish. It's a cardinal kit, a laser cut cardinal kit. And I think anybody that kind of just goes with the instructions and doesn't invent anything can be basically duplicating this with very little trouble. Now, a lot of my friends already have cardinal kits and they're well under construction. Cooper's got his finished already. And we're going to be trying to, well, the other guys that are using the candy apple paint already, I hope I have some pictures. And as I have, I'm going to leave some room at the end of the tape, so as years go by and I can get together some pictures of other people that have used Brodak dope, candy apple dope, I can kind of put them at the end of the tape. We'll leave a few minutes, but basically we're at the end of a really great adventure for Mike. And I think he's really come a long way, enjoyed it. He's more than happy to share everything he's learned along the way. We want to especially thank Will Nomura. Those exceptionally good spray guns, and this plane was painted with them. And all of the people that have helped. Needless to say, to John Brodak, without John, none of this would be possible. Without John's effort and love of the hobby. But I think we can now safely say we've added a dimension. We've added something to the hobby that wasn't there before, and it's something even ranked beginners can enjoy. And I hope the videotape gives everybody the best chance of possible success. Please share the tape, pass them around. And remember to help all the new guys in your club and see that they become like the Mike Kajeskis of the future. And thanks to Mike for sharing this adventure with us. One final thought, these are both planes that have been around for a long time. Both of them are, one is 9 years old, one is 14. And they have the same dye from the same company that's now part of the Brodak Candy Apple Dope. They've stood the test of time well, but it's always good to keep any airplane out of the sun whenever possible. But even these have definitely had a long service life, and they've stood the test of time. And we always have plenty of Brodak dope in stock. Candy colors, regular colors, thinner, fisheye killer, Flexol, anything you may need. We stock it, we ship it out the same day. It's the way we always do business. And if you're not a subscriber normally to Wendy's videos, you might want to consider checking out a few of the tapes. There's a lot of good construction information. Both of these planes, every step of construction and finish is available on video. Tuning the 4-cycle engines, tuning tune pipes, running Tiger 60s. We try to do it all, and we try to always have room in the hobby for people that do it a little bit different than we do. Now, who would have ever thought that when they took the picture as I look so young and handsome? Not really. Speaking of young and handsome, a final thank you to John Brodak for making this product possible to all flyers, all lovers of model aviation.